welcome to the Daily Dawg podcast. Today is Friday, October 31st. It is Halloween, All Hallows Eve, and hopefully that's going to be scary for one team and a lot of trick-or-treating and fun and candy for another team. And I guess you know what I'm trying to make the analogy of there. Hopefully Georgia is heading down to the world's largest outdoor cocktail party for what should be, according to our reckoning, the 104th edition. Some people will tell you it's the 103rd time these two teams have played. But again, Florida's been trying to shirk that first loss in the series for who knows how long. So we're not letting them get away from it. Welcome to the 104th edition of the world's largest cocktail party, which almost traditionally has almost always taken place right at or around Halloween weekend. So this week, Halloween is the day before. So this is the eve of the Georgia-Florida game. And like I said, hopefully it'll be good trick-or-treating for Georgia, and they'll be collecting lots of candy, not just the tiny little crummy ones that say fun size, but the real candies, the good stuff too. You know, like Reese's Pieces, bags of Reese's Pieces or Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Three Musketeers bars are okay. I guess you can have Snickers bars. Those are all good. Hopefully you're avoiding the Mr. Good bars and the Mounds. Nobody wants those Mounds things. So, make sure you're giving out good candy because you want no treat or no tricks happening at your house. And so hopefully there's no tricks up our sleeve or up the sleeve of the Florida Gators that are going to offset the Bulldogs from taking on and taking down the Gators this year. We're going to get into that. And but it's not time for a breakdown yet. First and foremost, we got to kind of take a look at who Florida is. And, I guess today's edition, we can say, is the edition of, so you want to coach in the SEC. You want to coach a national title contending team. Well, Billy Napier has found out that is a tough row to hoe. And frankly, I guess he all survived maybe up to a year longer than we thought he would. Probably not terrible surprise that he was ousted here in the middle of this season. And that leaves us kind of in a quandary as we're looking at trying to break down this game. We really have no idea what we're going to be facing in this edition of the Florida Gators. We know a little bit about who's on the team, and we don't hardly know anything, though, about what to expect from a coaching point of view. We've talked about a lot this season that it's my opinion that a lot of teams have been really taking advantage of the fact that we have such a stable program, that Kirby Smart's been in place. This is his 10th season now, and that Georgia has traditionally focused on playing its game, that Georgia is going to line up and do what Georgia does, and Georgia doesn't expect to have to trick you or surprise you or do anything really exciting. We're just going to line up and we're going to play better. Each man is going to look at the man across from him and play better than that guy, and he's going to do his job, keep his head down, not worry about the scoreboard, not worry about the play that just happened or the next one that's coming. Just do your job this play, and it should all work out. That's Kirby's philosophy. He's brought some of that from Nick Saban, some that he's learned across wherever he got these ideas. Of course, he grew up as a coach's son, so it's not like he just fell into coaching for the first time when he met Nick Saban. So he's built a program that really has shown us a lot of his identity built into this program. I think we all can remember and think that, Kirby Smart was a guy who outsized his capabilities a little bit. He was not the biggest guy. He was not the fastest guy. You look at him on stats on paper, you look at him physically, and you don't think, hey, that's a guy who's going to be a starting safety in the SEC. But he was, and he even held the record for interceptions here at the University of Georgia. So, this was a guy who was a productive player, and a lot of that was on grit and passion and energy, and he's instilled that in this team, and he's instilled that in all of his teams. So, but what does that mean? It also means that other coaches are really starting to lock in, and I think we've seen that a lot this year. And this is not to make excuses, and this is not to say, oh, that's the whole reason things are different this year, is just because people know what Georgia's going to do, and so now they can attack us. A lot of it is like we've talked about. We also just don't have the depth and the talent and the ability to overwhelm people. It was sort of an impressive thing for the years that we were able to do it, to just say, hey, this is what we're going to do. You know what we're going to do. We're not going to try and trick you. We're just going to line up and be us, and you're not going to be able to stop us. And for the last many years, that's been true. This year, the record still plays out. Look, Georgia's number 5 in the country. They're 6-1 coming into this game. Most polls, most computer simulations, most things show that Georgia has an excellent chance to make the college football playoff. Most polls, not just polls, but I mean most predictive models and computer simulations expect Georgia to either win the remaining games on its schedule or lose no more than one. Georgia will be favored in all the remaining games. So Georgia can probably afford to lose a game and still make the playoff. I think right now, this year, if we were to lose a game, that would probably put us even further behind in the race for the SEC to make the SEC championship. Although last year we did lose 2 conference games during the season, one to Alabama and one to Ole Miss, both on the road, both to very talented teams. And yet we still made the SEC championship game, and as you well know, won the SEC championship. But right now, this year, as we look at, and we'll break this down probably a little bit more tomorrow, and especially after this game, because after this weekend, we are going to get the first college football playoff rankings. So this will be the time where I brought this up earlier in the season. We start off the year, and the first thing we get that tells us anything that we can all hang our hat on and say, hey, what's this team look like? What do people think? Is that coaches poll. That coaches poll comes out a couple weeks before the first game in the summer, before the first game in August, September. And that's your first chance to see a ranking. Then the preseason AP poll comes out, and from there on, everybody's looking at the AP poll. So here we are in week 10 of the season, and everybody's looking at the AP poll. And then next week, we're going to get a college football playoff poll. And all of a sudden, the AP poll is not going to matter that much because the AP poll isn't going to determine who makes it to the college football playoff. Now, the playoff committee, I'm sure, isn't going to ignore the AP poll. They'll look at what the other voters and people say, and it's always a little bit hard, if you put somebody in or leave somebody out, say you leave the 5th ranked team out of the playoff because you have a whole different poll, but that's their prerogative. They have a committee, and they'll look at what they look at. There is some criteria that they're supposed to be judging strength of schedule and who they played, and keeping that more in mind this year. Have some computer rankings that always makes everybody who remembers the BCS cringe. That'll help them evaluate where they're going to place the teams. But we're going to find out for the first time what those people are thinking as we get now to the final 4, 5, 6 games of the year. 4, 5, 6 games. Georgia, including this Florida game, has 5 games left in the regular season. Obviously, if we made the SEC championship game, then that's a 6th game. And then after that, hopefully we're in the playoff. And so we got at least 5, maybe 6 games to play before we would play a playoff game. So, and then there's polls to come after each of those. So we're going to get the playoff polls each week, and we'll see how the teams progress as we come down the final stretch of the season. So back to what we were talking about. So Billy Napier has been ousted at Florida, and he was able to coach, let's see, I kind of forgot now, but let me see. Okay, yeah, this was his 4th season, so he made it a little over 3.5 seasons as the coach at Florida. And in the time that since Kirby took over at Georgia, when he goes against Billy Gonzalez, who's the interim coach now for Florida, this will be the 4th coach that Kirby Smart will have faced as the opponent over at Florida. So Jim McElwain, if you remember him, was actually still coach at Florida when Kirby took over, and actually McElwain won that very first game. Kirby's first game in 2016 was a loss to Florida, 24-10. So that was in Kirby's first season, where he went 8-5 and had some up and down results during the season, and Jim McElwain got the better of him. And right off the bat, I think all Georgia fans were a little concerned, because the first thing that many of us judge a new coach on, I know we all looked at each new coach, and going back, as I talked about this history, when Ray Goff took over, we began being, he took over the first year and he won the first game, and then he loses all his remaining games as head coach of the Georgia Bulldogs. And then Jim Donnan comes in and he takes over, and he initially loses his first couple games. He loses his first game, and then he wins his second game in 1997, but that would be the only one he won against Spurrier and Florida and the Gators. And so then Mark Richt comes in, and Mark Richt righted the ship to some degree over his 15 seasons that he was able to face the Florida Gators as the Georgia coach, Mark Richt will go 5-10. So that's better. He won 5 games, okay, compared to the other coaches. And the other coaches, you might say, well, maybe they didn't last as long. No. Well, one, they didn't last as long because they didn't have as good a record as Mark Richt. And 2, they didn't last as long because they didn't beat Florida. And 3, even if they did, if you extrapolate out their record, they would not have won 5 games, even had they been given 15 seasons. So Mark Richt definitely rights the ship a little bit. He gets in his first couple of years, he takes it hard, but he eventually gets it kind of turned around and starts kind of trading paint a little bit back and forth with the Gators. But we don't really start to take control of this series completely until Kirby Smart takes over. And now we've won 7 of the last 8 in the series. We've won 10 of the last 14. And so definitely we are starting to reassert control. However, as I've talked about many a time, and I keep referring to it as my time or since I stepped on campus as a freshman, but I think the more and more I've reflected on it, I think this makes a good place to put down a marker and sort of evaluate programs and the recent history. As much as I love the long, detailed history of Georgia football and the rich and deep history that it is, as we're evaluating where programs are and what really matters to us in our lifetime, it's great to read about and remember and hear about things that happened before you were even born. But, what I've really been focusing on this season is what has happened in the last 35 years of Georgia football, which essentially encompasses my true fandom. Like I said, not that I was unaware or not even somewhat of a fan of Georgia, but I really became just completely entrenched and part of the Georgia Bulldog Nation once I stepped foot on campus as a freshman. That's when it all really clicked in, where I started to bleed red and black and live and die with every victory for our team, and not just a football team, but all the teams. So let me throw a shout out there to say that the women's soccer team, by the way, is the number 3 seed in the SEC soccer tournament, and I apologize, I haven't looked up to see when and where that's coming. I think it's coming off soon, but they, I think, had a bye in the way that soccer tournament is set up, and so they had a nice season, and this was the first time they've been seeded as high as the number 3 seed, and so let's hope that the women's soccer team continues success on this season. Congratulations to them. So, but back to where we are right now with the Bulldogs. So now we've already seen 3 coaches, McElwain, Dan Mullen, and Billy Napier, have gone against Kirby Smart, and each of those, or of those coaches, how have they done? Well, McElwain was 1-1. He only got to coach 2 games. He was let go in the middle of his. He had a season before Kirby Smart. So Kirby Smart went against him in his second season, and he was fired in the before the end of his third season, but he had already played and lost to Georgia in that time frame. So Jim McElwain goes 1-1 against Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. Dan Mullen takes over, and he won the game in 2020. 2020, was a little bit of a step back season for us, sandwiched around these championship runs, with the 2017, 2018 teams making run to the playoff and the SEC championship. 2020, we lose 2 games in the regular season. That's the COVID season, so it's a 10-game regular season, only SEC teams. We lost to both Florida and Alabama, which left us out of the SEC championship and left us out of playoff consideration or anything like that. We do end up going to a bowl game. We actually finish in the top 10, ranked 7th in the nation, but really never threatening the elite level that year. That was just a year that didn't quite work out as well. But so Dan Mullen gets the win in 2020, and the Florida Gators go to the SEC championship that year. That would be his only win against Georgia in 4 tries. And then Billy Napier has taken over, and now he's been dismissed. He won't get his 4th crack, even though this was his 4th season. He won't get his 4th crack at playing Georgia. He's been dismissed, and so he finishes his career as a Florida coach at 0-3. So this is good news. Again, we're talking about coaches and personalities and how that's one of the things we talked about in the history podcast a couple days ago, is how the coaches and the histories have really sort of their personalities and their record and their achievements are kind of really attached to this series a bit. Spurrier completely changed the Vince Dooley. Or I mean, I guess you back up. You say when Vince Dooley took over in the '60s, Georgia began a stretch of just owning Florida for many years, all throughout Vince Dooley's time. And then he retires, and then a year after he retires, Steve Spurrier takes over, and then he just dominates the Georgia-Florida series. He goes wins 13 out of 14 before he's no longer the coach at Florida. But then other coaches are able to pick it up. And like we said, even the sort of embarrassing Ron Zook and his abject mediocrity as a coach at Florida, they still managed to win 2 out of 3 against us in the Ron Zook era. So, that's a humbling and difficult time. And that's sort of almost the peak of when futility felt like it was setting in the series, if you were a Bulldog fan with Florida. So, I guess what I could say is, look, you hear it all the time that people, and it's been quite the lesson. We've seen Brian Kelly, left Notre Dame, came to LSU because he didn't feel like Notre Dame was a strong enough platform from which to win a national championship in FBS football. He had won a championship in the lower division, and he felt like, I think, Grand Valley State or someplace like that. But he went to Notre Dame, was an excellent coach, a very winning coach at Notre Dame, and he multiple times had Notre Dame in position to be considered at the end of the season or even have a shot at the appropriate playoff or bowl or BCS, whichever system was in place during that time. But they were generally routed out of whatever game they made it into. And so the feeling was that they'd sort of hit a ceiling, or that he felt like he had hit a ceiling. He'd done all he could. He recruited the best players he could. He put the best schemes. He got them to sort of that final step. And there just wasn't enough talent on the field to overcome that. And so he made the switch. He jumped over to LSU, where there's no lack of talent. And like I said, when you look at coaches, a couple guys in Les Miles and Ed Orgeron, who we've come to see are not exactly luminaries in the world of just brilliant coaching, and yet these guys were able to take LSU to a national championship on the heels of Nick Saban having taken LSU to a national championship. So Brian Kelly leaves LSU now as the first coach in the last 4, including himself. He's the first one to not win a national championship while at LSU. So that is quite a program where you can say, look, almost every coach who steps in there has a realistic shot of winning a national championship. Billy Napier was theoretically granted a similar position. The Florida job is often considered one of the premium jobs in the country for many years. And I alluded to the idea that it was, Bear Bryant at Alabama that had suggested that if Florida ever got the right coach and they realized the right opportunities, that Florida would be a monster. And yet somehow Florida did sort of survive in a very mediocre state through much of its time in the SEC, not winning its first SEC championship until the mid-1980s. But Spurrier helped make up for that, and they've really come on strong. And we're going to look at some of that, because I think what we're going to do today is, instead of spending too much time, we're going to talk a little bit and say what we can about Billy Gonzalez, but he has no coaching record to speak of as a head coach for sure. I mean, he has a long coaching record. He's been coaching for years, especially as wide receiver, offensive coordinator, passing game coordinator. So he's got a record in that regard, but there's nothing as a head coach and nothing as a schemer or planner that we can look at and give us a lot to go on, like we've broken down the matchups. This is usually the place where a lot of times we're breaking down the matchups and say, well, what do we have coach versus coach? What does Kirby Smart do? What has this coach done? What can we expect them to do in the game? What do they hang their hat on? We certainly had that with Kiffin coming into the game with Ole Miss in our last outing. So we felt like that was an opportunity to where you could really see and expect. And I think a lot of what we talked about came to pass. Not exactly the same way we thought it would, but Kiffin, largely like Kirby Smart, lives up to himself. He has a reputation, and he is who he is. And he's a fine coach, as I've said before. And I think he's really wrung quite a bit of goodness out of what Ole Miss has to offer. Again, there may be a ceiling there. Maybe not. Maybe in the days that we're in now, maybe this new era where, there's not as much I think what is true about this new era, and we're not sure what it is yet. I think that's another theme that's come out all season as we're talking about. We don't really know what this era. I've called the old days the bowl and poll era, right? Because you went to the bowls and you tried to win up, be number one in the poll, and then you had the BCS era and you had the 4-team playoff era. Now we're in the 12-team playoff era. I mean, that's what I've been calling it so far. But what does it mean? Along with that, there's all the changes in transfer portal, and now schools being able to pay players directly, so they don't even have to do it sort of second hand and third hand through outside parties where they have less control. So there's a combination of NIL and just straight team money available to these kids now, so they can transfer. And when you look at some of the players out there, they've been, they have 4 or 5 years of eligibility, depending on how they use their red shirt and whether or not they get hurt. And you'll see that they essentially are at a different team every year. And the good ones often are climbing their way up. You see them start, against like Ole Miss. We played Ole Miss, and their quarterback was Trinidad Chambliss. We talked about him, and it's quite the media story this year. He starts at Ferris State, which is not even on the radar. I mean, that's not even a Marshall or an Austin P, as much as we talked about them when we played them. You're at least familiar with those schools. You've heard of them. I've never even heard of Ferris State. It's not even on the radar. But so he emerges from a Ferris State, and he's able to be a starting quarterback and be leading, or one of the leading quarterbacks in the SEC in a season where there's 4 or 5 teams in the top 10, top 15 in the SEC, depending on which week you're looking at. So it is a new era. It is a different time, and we don't know exactly how it's all going to work and how it's going to settle out yet. But maybe Ole Miss is a place where you can, at this point, if there's enough money and enough will for players to follow a coach and to get the money and to get the opportunity, then I think it certainly is possible that a winning team can pop up anywhere. We're seeing what Vanderbilt's doing. It's not clear if that's a championship level team yet, but it's certainly a top 25 team, maybe a top 15 team by the time it's all said and done. I can get behind that and believe that. And that's not something you would have thought was likely true at Vanderbilt anytime in most of my lifetime, in most of these last 35 years we're talking about. So Ole Miss has a lot to offer. And, you got an iconic coach, you got a lot of good publicity, you got a beautiful place to go to school and a nice, a good overall campus, a lot of good things to say about being in Oxford and Ole Miss. And, if the money's right and the opportunity's right. And then the other thing is, because the talent is being spread around so much more, a handful of special players could be enough to make the difference. One of the things we saw 2 years ago when Ole Miss came to Athens and they were a top 10 team and they were celebrated, and hey, maybe this is the year. Well, they got beat down 52-17. Well, there was still a sizable talent gap between Georgia and Ole Miss at that point. But like we've been saying, you can't hoard talent like that. It spreads out a little bit more. One of the repercussions of spreading out talent is that 1 or 2 exceptional players, a little bit like going back in Georgia history to the Herschel era, where you have basically a good core team, a veteran team, good defense, and then you add one really special player, and now all of a sudden you have a difference. We're seeing that again, for instance, look around the SEC at Oklahoma right now. Oklahoma had very poor prospects. They did not have a great season last year. They had a great defense, but they couldn't score a point to save their lives. It felt like they were just always behind it, except for when they played Alabama. They were always behind it offensively, and they couldn't match the production of their defense. But they bring in a hot quarterback, a guy who put up over 4,000 yards of offense at Washington State. They bring him in on a transfer, and suddenly Oklahoma's able to score points, and boom, they leap into the top 10. Now they lost to Texas. Mateer was hurt. It's not clear whether he was recovered enough, even though he came back and played in that game. They played better against Ole Miss. They were better offensively than they were against Texas. They still lost because, again, Ole Miss is a really good team. And so, again, I'm just saying there's a lot of opportunity where 1 or 2 players can maybe turn the difference when we've spread the talent around all these teams so much. So maybe it doesn't take or maybe since you can't have that overwhelming force, that juggernaut team I keep mentioning anymore, then maybe what you get is you just need a special performance, a breakout performance here or there. So anyway, let's get back to where we are with Florida. I guess the point I was trying to get at is, look, So Billy Napier came to Florida, and I guess it just shows you, the Brian Kelly and the Billy Napier thing just kind of show you the opportunity to come to one of these schools that is thought to be a place where you can and where we know national championships have been won in the last 20 years. So you know it could be done again. It's like being given the keys to a brand new Ferrari. And we hear the stories from time to time. If you pay any attention, there's some guys wait their whole life. They get that chance to get that Ferrari. They go to the dealership and they literally run it off the road on the way home because they're just not prepared to deal with the what it means to have that power and that capability in your hands with a car like a Ferrari. And Billy Napier seemed to learn a lot of the Saban coaching tree things. He had quality control experts. He had large staff. He was invested in recruiting. He did all kinds of things to build culture. But what he was not able to do was make the product on the field particularly good. And we're going to talk about in a minute, they did have some talent, so they weren't devoid of talent. They may not have been at the talent level of Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, those elite teams, or other even elite teams in the SEC, but they've not won commensurate with the talent that he brought there. And, that may be that they just didn't have the right scheming and the right ability for in-game coaching. They had the right ideas and the right way to build a program and a structure maybe with his administration there at Florida, but maybe just not the overall right fit. And I say that because even this season, Florida has consistently been plagued by mistakes on the field, penalties and things that they lost the USF game at home. Yes, I know USF is getting a lot of love, and partly because they beat Florida on the road, and that helped them get another win that they wouldn't have had and helps keep them in the fringe of the top 25 ranking discussion. But, you saw that when they played Miami, who may or may not also be a truly great team, maybe just a good team, we're starting to understand now, another team that's a top 10, top 15, but not dominant team. Well, Miami just blew USF out of the water. USF didn't exactly blow Florida out of the water. They just kept it close, and they won an 18-16 game, but they were able to win that game in part on the final drive because Florida had some penalties and some really dumb penalties, spitting on an opponent and stuff like that kept the drive alive for USF so that they were able to score and win the game at the end. So a lack of discipline, a lack of being prepared. There's multiple times, I think, if I'm remembering this right, and again, I'm not watching every minute of a Florida game, so forgive me, but I'm pretty sure that I've noticed or heard that there have been multiple games over the last 3-4 seasons under Billy Napier where they got the penalty for two guys ending up on the field with the same jersey number. And look, this happens a lot. I mean, college football compared to pro football, there's usually two guys wearing a lot of the numbers because at home they can dress out over 100 guys. Everybody, not just the guys who are on scholarship, they can only take so many on the road when they go on the road by rules, but at home they can dress out everybody they want. So they can have 150, 180 people if they had them out there all wearing jerseys. Well, obviously, since we don't see any triple digits, we don't see guys wearing number 107 out on the field, we keep it pretty much between 0 and 99. So if you got 120 kids, 140 kids dressed out, then obviously you're going to have some repeat numbers. And that usually works out fine since most of the time there's a big split between people who play offense and defense. We don't have that many true two-way players anymore. But on special teams, that's an opportunity where you have a chance to have some guys from both the offense and the defense come out and be on the special teams unit. And that's also a terrible place to have a penalty for having two guys for the same jersey because you've done all the work, say, to punt, and then you go out to have gunners go out and run down the punt, and you end up with two guys on the field with the same number. You get the penalty, and then you don't get the punt. You give the ball back to the other team. That's just the kind of thing that can't happen. A school like Florida should be better disciplined, better coached, and better understood what's going on in the game from the sideline to make sure that those kind of mistakes don't happen. And maybe they happen in your first year, but to still have those kind of things happening in your third and fourth year coaching was something that I think was very distressing for the Florida administration and for Florida fans, and I can certainly understand that. So again, I'm not trying to throw mud on Billy Napier. I don't know him. He seems like a decent guy, and he seems like, I'm sure he tried very hard. One thing I have said about the Florida team, and I'll say it again as we get in this discussion, as we talk about what this is going to mean for Georgia, playing a team with an interim head coach where their head coach was just fired. A lot of times you see a firing bump, right? I mean, sometimes when a team is struggling and not playing well, you see that there is tension, that the coach, and I mean, look, I don't know how LSU is going to play their next time out, but they got embarrassed at home by Texas A&M. But Kelly, I didn't think a lot of Kelly. Kelly seemed to be a guy who, I mean, he would say, yeah, it's on me that we didn't do it, but you didn't believe it. I mean, you saw him dressing down his coaches and players and just having a lot of attitude, and he just seems like a guy who is a little more in line to blame the other folks more than truly see what happened on the field as his failure if they didn't live up to the expectation. And so I don't think Billy Napier was that kind of guy. And as near as I mean, look, Florida won 4 in a row down the stretch to finish 8-5 last year, and basically saved Billy Napier's job coming into this season. And they've won 2 out of their last 3. You know, I mean, Billy Napier got fired after a win. I mean, I guess for him, at least he gets to go out on a high note, right? He gets to walk off the field a winner. I always, you know, you play hoops, you always like to hit that last shot before you walk off the court. I mean, I don't know if he feels better about that. I'm sure he doesn't, and I'm not trying to make fun of him, I promise. But I just am trying to say, hey, look, at least they won their last game. And they won 2 of their last 3. They beat Texas, and then they were not able to win the next game. They went and, you know, all of a sudden now, I don't know who they played. I apologize about that. But then they played... but then this last time they played Mississippi State, and that was another game that, you know, they won. And if you weren't paying attention, it's like, well, they beat Mississippi State, but it was closer than it should have been, intense down the stretch. So, but they have won 2 of the last 3. So this was not a team. My point is, this was not a team that had quit on their coach. They were playing hard for their coach. So I'm not sure there's going to be this obvious or clear sort of, oh, we fired our coach and we're all fired up bump right now, because, you know, I don't think they were that unhappy with their coach. Everybody else was, but the players were not necessarily that unhappy with him. So, all right, let's, so that's what I want to say is, look, you know, welcome to life in the SEC. Welcome to life in modern college football. You get your shot. You want a chance to be the top guy, to be in a place where you could win a championship. Well, we've already seen 3 SEC coaches fired this season: Billy Napier, Brian Kelly, and Sam Pittman. I like Sam Pittman. I think they gave him a reasonable, I don't know what to expect, but I think it's fair that for Arkansas to say, hey, look, just being 7-6, even if that's where they close out, that's not good enough. We're trying to compete at the top level of the SEC, and we want to show some pride. We want to at least believe that we could make the SEC championship game or threaten to make it, right? And you're not going to get there at 7-6. So I like Sam Pittman. I think he did a decent job. I'm not sure that Arkansas can do more than that in today's world. I know they are a former elite team, a former national championship team, a national high-level team, but in today's day and age, I mean, again, like I just said, maybe anybody can, but I think Arkansas has some challenges in getting people to come there that you might not have at places like Ole Miss or even Vanderbilt. I mean, you laugh, but Vanderbilt's upgraded their stadium, and they're in Nashville. Nashville is a hot town to be in these days. Lots of amazing things, not just the country music scene anymore, but there's TV, there's movies, there's other music, and there's a lot of entertainment industry, and it's just becoming another part of the South that's becoming a very vital and growing part of the entertainment world. And so there's a lot going on in Nashville. And, you know, players are not immune to this. They like that. They know what stuff is around there, and they want to be where the moving and the shaking is. So you might be surprised to find that Nashville actually can rep better than you might think, and maybe better so than Fayetteville, Arkansas. So anyway, Hugh Freeze, Brent Venables, Mark Stoops, these are all guys who've had to answer questions this year about whether or not they're still going to be coaching, and they may not be still coaching at these schools. I know I just mentioned Oklahoma's been in the top 10. They've been in the top 25. They've got a killer stretch coming, and it's not clear whether or not they're really going to survive that, or if they're going to end up basically where they ended up last year at a 500 or less record or close to that. And if they do, then, they may give up on Brent Venables. Mark Stoops is the best coach Kentucky's had in anybody's lifetime that anybody can remember, and they're talking about whether or not he should stay. Hugh Freeze, I think had Hugh Freeze lost the game to Arkansas last week, which they were very close to doing, then Hugh Freeze would have been a race to see who got the announcement on firing first, Brian Kelly or Hugh Freeze. But Hugh Freeze gets a reprieve, at least for another few days. I'm sure that Auburn fans are kind of like thinking, come on, man, why couldn't we fire our coach? Now Florida is looking for a coach. Penn State's looking for a coach. LSU is going to look for a coach. How are we going to get a good coach if all these teams are looking for a coach? We need to fire our coach and get out and be a better coach. I'm sure a lot of Auburn fans are thinking that. And, that may not be unreasonable. All right, let's dig back in. So where are we on Florida? So I think what I'm going to do is sort of continue a little bit of the history lesson of the last that we started before. We talked about the Florida program and coaches and how that compared to Georgia. I want to break down the records a little bit more and say, what's the state of the program? Who is Florida right now? What is the state of Florida? Not the state of Florida, but the state of the Florida football program. What is that right now? And I think the best we can do is look at where it was and where it's been heading, tell you a little bit about where they are right now and maybe what it means to us and what we can expect going forward. So look, I talked about that in the last 35 years, or since I was a freshman, we are 13-22 against Florida. So this is our worst record against any opponent. And I think this is where I have the most consternation. And if you followed me at all, those of you who know me, friends, family, you know that I'm like an elephant, right? I'm long-lived and long remembered on these things. I go back as far as I can remember on these grievances and the way things have been perceived. And I'm always looking to see Georgia continue to rise and get to a higher station, both now and in the past and in the future. So I think one of the things that was tough for me, I told you in the last podcast about how I was sort of introduced to the idea, hey, we always beat Florida. And under Vince Dooley, we did. And then all of a sudden it turned around and like one game. All of a sudden, we win in 1989, then we lose in 90, 91, 92, 93, 94. We lose 7 in a row, and then 13 of the next 14. And I'm just like, wow. Okay, so this takes me all the way to when I'm already, out of college, married, moving on in life, and we still can't beat Florida. I've never seen a Florida win. I told you about the horrible experience of going to the 1991 world's largest cocktail party down in Jacksonville, and how terrible and miserable an experience that was, not just because we lost the game, but for every other reason along with it. It was just a terrible experience. So I hope everybody out there, especially some key people, are having a much better time of it this time than I did. 1991, this is 2025, so it's at 34 years ago. So, at least you're not sitting no matter what happens, it's not going to be raining and cold, and you're not going to be sitting in a rust bucket, metal piece of junk stadium. Even though they are about to tear down and rebuild or replace the stadium, it's still 5 times, million times, whatever it is, better than the stadium that I had to sit and watch the Georgia-Florida game in. So I think here's what really struck me as I was preparing the notes for this, is that it was not just that we were losing to Florida. That was obviously true, but it's also the stature of our programs. Georgia, as I was sort of alluded to or mentioned, but just to be more clear, coming into that 1989-1990 timeframe, Georgia is an elite blue blood team, among the top 15 or 20 teams in the history of college football. Florida is still waiting to get there, and they haven't yet. They, again, coming into the mid-'80s, they still haven't even won an SEC championship. So Spurrier created a high water mark. He wins a Heisman Trophy. He was going to potentially lead them to a championship, but again, a Florida loss in his Heisman season, or Georgia loss in his Heisman season, kind of messes everything up. He still wins the Heisman, but he kind of never forgives Georgia for that. And Florida has never, until he comes back as a coach, never really attains that greatness that they could, except for maybe just little brief moments. So, but when he gets there, which again, starting in my experience, this last 35 years, you go back to the beginning of this last 35 years, starting in 1990, well, the SEC championship game unfolds in 1992, right? That's when the conference had expanded and then split into the East and West division. And so that's when Arkansas and South Carolina come to the party, and they join the SEC, and we go to where now we have Now we have the two divisions. And so Georgia's chance that very first season, we have one of our better seasons. We have a 10-win season. I've already talked about that. And losing to both Tennessee and Florida guarantees, even though we lost to Tennessee early in the season, the loss to Florida guarantees that Florida gets to go to the SEC championship game and we don't. So they kind of take that opportunity away from us. And then we won't go to the SEC championship game for the first 10 years, but we'll watch our rivals go there. So Florida is actually going to appear in 7 of the first 10 SEC championship games. So those first 10 years, Florida's in there 7 times, which is, actually quite a bit staggering, to be honest. And on top of that, what did I say? They're going to win a bunch of those too. Well, we'll come back to that. So Tennessee represents, just to make matters worse, right? We're also battling Tennessee during this time frame, and we've already gone through the Tennessee history a lot back during the Tennessee game. But Tennessee is going to make the SEC championship the other 3 times in those first 10 years that Florida doesn't. So again, we're just shut out. We're watching our other SEC East rivals, the perceived blue bloods or original bigger SEC teams out of that East division. Because you got Kentucky and Vanderbilt and South Carolina in there with us, but you got Florida and Tennessee and Georgia. And so here's Florida and Tennessee just divvying up all the spoils and we get nothing. And I think that highlighted for me, especially as a fan, that sense of angst about losing the Florida game. I mean, because not, like I said yesterday or in the last podcast, not every time that game necessarily was a direct impact, like, if we'd won the Florida game, we're going to go this. But clearly, if you keep losing to Florida every year like that, and Florida's going to the SEC championship every year, just about, well, clearly there's a correlation. And it is, football is a zero, especially in conference plays. Football is a zero-sum situation. It's not just in conference play. You look at Ohio State, Texas, first game of the year, right? Number 1 versus number 2, or number 1 versus number 3. Well, as soon as one team beats the other, then that other team is no longer whatever it is. So number 1 Ohio State beats number 3 Texas, or number 1 Texas loses to number 3 Ohio State. So Ohio State moves up to number 1, Texas falls down to number 3, 4, or 5, and then Texas loses again. Every time you lose position. It is a zero-sum thing, right? And then, of course, in conference play, when you're playing for a bid in a conference championship game, and especially when you're in divisions like that, if you lose a game inside your division to a team that's also going to be competing that season for the division championship and the spot in the game, well, it's going to be hard to get past them, right? You have to have a 1-game better record than them because they own the tiebreaker against you. So you can't just go 6-2 and they go 6-2 and you make the game because they own the tiebreaker against you unless there's some other tiebreaker phenomena. And that happened to us a few times. We officially, I was trying to look this up, and I think I mentioned it last podcast. I hadn't been able to find it. But I know that there were several years where the official record book says that we were SEC co-champions, or SEC East co-champions, but those were some years where we had the same record, but the tiebreaker went to Florida or Tennessee, and so we didn't go. And, I think none of us bother to remember or think about that. We're not hanging our hat on, we were SEC co-champion. No, I mean, that's, SEC East co-champion. I'm sorry. We'd be happy to be SEC co-champion. That used to be the way. So those first 10 years go by. And Florida's there 7 years. We don't make it at all. Tennessee goes the other 3, and we're just sitting on the sidelines. And for me, that's certainly building my anxiety of like, what's the state of our program, right? Then finally, we break through. We go to the SEC championship game in 2002. We win it. And then we're actually going to go to 3 games in 5 years. We go in 2022. We go again in 2023. A lot of us actually forget about that one. And then we're back again in 2002, 2003. And then we're back again in 2005, and we win it again. So we win 2 out of the 3 times we go. So we win the SEC championship in 2002 and 2005, and we were in the game in 2003. So that's nice. But then Florida's going to kind of reassert themselves, and they're going to go to 5 of the next, starting in 2006, they're going to appear in 5 of the next 11 SEC championship games. Now, in that span of 11 games, we're going to go twice again in 2011 and 2012. And I think that 2011 is another one we all forget about. We talk about 2012 all the time because that's the Chris Connolly catching the ball and coming up just 5 yards short, right, of the goal line. Again, that's no knock on Chris. Chris is a great player, and he just instinctively caught that ball, and it went badly. Ball got tipped, but we all sort of live with the agony of that, and I know the players did too. Because it felt like we had all the momentum and we're going to score that touchdown and win. And again, like we said, that's a year where Brian Kelly, I think, is coach at Notre Dame. And, they have a national championship worthy team, as everybody thinks. They're undefeated, but Alabama just blows them out, wins 40 to something, 40 to, like 3 or something. I don't remember what the score was, but I think it was 42-10, something like that. Just blows them out. And it was widely considered that Georgia would have done the same thing. So the real national championship game was in that SEC championship game in 2012, but we all tend to forget we were actually there in 2011 as well. That one didn't go even as well. Much worse loss. So by the time you get to the end of 2016, so this is where Kirby Smart takes over in the 2016 season, but Florida's run here, I guess, just from 1990 to 2016, Florida is going to appear in 12 SEC championship games, and Georgia's going to appear in just 5. So it took us 10 years to get to the first one, and they'd already been to 7 during that time. So again, for me, a lot of eye candy jealousy, looking out there and going, hey, we keep losing to them and they keep going to the SEC championship game, and everybody's talking about them at the end of the season and nobody's talking about us. And, that was just a mark of where we needed to go and what needed to happen. But since 2017, much like the record in the series where we've won 7 of 8 against Florida, well, we've also been to 7 of 8 SEC championship games. So again, I haven't broken down the schedule to say winning the SEC, the game against Florida, the winner goes to the SEC championship game. I think actually what we're going to sign, I'm going to show you here in a little bit, it actually has more to do with where the programs have been going. The programs have been heading in the direction of, little itch there. The programs have just been heading in different directions. From 1990 to the middle of these 35 years, for 19 seasons, Florida was just crushing it. And then they begin a decline process that's really getting worse. And Georgia begins a restoration process way back in the 90s that takes a while. They kind of limp through those early 90s, and then all of a sudden towards the later 90s, we start getting a lot better, and it's kind of incremental, and then we take baby steps. We get into the SEC championship, still no national championship, still well outside of that. But then now these last 7, 8, 9 years, now we're the team that is in the SEC championship game every year, right? And so 7 of the last 8 years, Georgia's been in that game. And during that span, Florida's just been in the game the one time, that 2020 season I mentioned with Dan Mullen during COVID, and they went and they played Alabama and they got beat by Alabama. So it was no big scrape there. So just for your edification, Alabama obviously has been to the most SEC championship games. And so, from the outside, I think the perception is Alabama's always there and they're either playing Georgia or Florida. In the first 10, 15 years, it was Florida they seemed to be playing all the time. And in the next 10 or 15 years, it became Georgia that they're playing all the time. So Alabama goes to 15 SEC championship games. They win 11 of them. During the same span of these last 33 years that there has been an SEC championship game, Auburn goes to 6, wins 3. LSU went to 7 and wins 5 of them. Nice record there. Florida went to 13 of them and wins 7 of them, but they haven't won one since 2008. So keep that in mind. So they managed to get into some games, but they started, in the early part, they were winning those games, and they also won some SEC championships, obviously then, national championships. Georgia's going to go to 12. So again, we still have a little ways to catch up. Florida is still ahead of us, 13 SEC championship games to 12. We've definitely made a comeback in these last 10 years, but we're still a game behind them in total appearances in the SEC championship, and way behind them in wins. They won 7 of 13, which is a winning record. So they're 7-6. We are 5. We've won 5 of 12, so we're 5-7 in our SEC championship game. Obviously, a losing record. And then Tennessee has managed to make it to 5 SEC championship games, and they've won 2 of them. So that's just a little breakdown on that. I think the key from all this is the state of the program when you look at these two programs together is just that Florida has been kind of, Spurrier came on and took them to new heights, and then Urban Meyer, to a certain degree, either kept it or even extended it. I mean, Spurrier, in some ways, a little bit of bad luck. He appeared in some championship games. He got in against Nebraska, had a chance to win SEC championship game, a national championship contest in the bowl game. Nebraska just ran all over them. So I don't know that it was all bad luck, but when you get yourself at that elite level, I think the same thing I guess what I'm trying to say is he only wins one national championship in those 14 seasons, which is, you say only, but when you are as elite as they were for that time, I said 14 seasons. I guess really he was there. I was counting 14 seasons where different things happened in the Florida roster, but Spurrier was actually only there for 12 seasons. But when you have the record, like you look at Spurrier's record, so he starts out first year, they're 9-2, then 10-2, 9-4, 11-2, 10-2-1, 12-1, 12-1. So, you got a couple 12-1, and one of those years he wins the national championship, one of them he loses. So 11-2 was a year where they went to the Sugar Bowl, had a shot at it. So, he has them at the elite level of the sport, but he's only able to get that one championship out of it during that time frame. Urban Meyer comes in, basically replicates or has a very similar record, but he's able to get 2 national championships out of it. Bottom line, in a span of 19 seasons from 1990 through 2008, Florida wins 3 national championships. And that's impressive. So here, wait a minute. So just to get back to it, they won 7 SEC championships during that time span. So all 7 of their wins come in those appearances between 1990 and 2008. 7 national championships. They won, 7 SEC championships, 3 national championships. They won 10 or more games 11 times during that span. Again, this is under 3 different coaches, although they skipped over greatness during the Ron Zook era. And they finished ranked in the top 25, 17 of 19 seasons during this time frame. They had an average rank during those 19 seasons, or when they were ranked, of 7.65. So they were basically in the top 10. The only 2 seasons they were unranked. But most seasons they finished the season ranked. They were ranked throughout the season, and most of the time the average ranking during that time span, they were 7.65. That's pretty impressive. And overall, during that time span they went 189, 51-1, or a 786 winning percentage. Okay, but then things are going to change, and just by comparison, during that same time span, that same 19 seasons, Georgia's going to go 162, 75-1, a 783 winning percentage. A 683. Sorry. So Georgia's almost winning 70% of their games. That's not bad, Georgia. Again, and I think this goes back to my idea of feeding the jealousy monster. Right? Here's Florida winning 7 SEC championships, 3 national championships, beating us year in and year out and making it to the SEC championship game. We have a lot of good seasons during this time frame, but we never make it to that elite level. We do finally win 2 SEC championships towards the end of this. Like I said, this 19 season runs from 90 to 2008. So we win the SEC championship in 2002 and 2005. But neither of those teams had a crack at the national championship like we talked about. And Florida managed to turn, of those 7 SEC championship seasons, 3 of them turn into national championship seasons. And overall, they won, 27 more games than us during the same 19 seasons. So they had an almost 100-point better winning percentage. 786 is a very elite winning percentage. 683 is a very good winning percentage. And that's basically the difference, right? Georgia finishes ranked 14 of 19 seasons of these 19 seasons, but Georgia's average rank when ranked in this time frame, 2.29, 2.3. 12, 12.3. So Florida, 7.5 average ranking, Georgia, almost 12.5 average ranking. So again, they're just 100 percentage point, or 100 points better winning percentage, 27 more wins over 19 seasons, about a third better in the rankings, and 3 national championships, and more than twice as many SEC championships, 3 times as many SEC championships. So Florida is just at an elite level. In fact, that run during those 19 seasons, again, about as good as any team could expect to have. Okay, I mean that's really the elite. But then now we go from 2009 to now, things kind of completely flip. Okay, now Florida during that time span goes from 2009 to now. Florida goes 130 and 81, which is just a 616 winning percentage. Again, solid, good, but not remarkable. They don't win any SEC or national championships from 2009 forward. They did win 10 or more games 5 seasons, 5 of the 17 seasons we're talking about. And we're going to go ahead and call that 17 seasons because this is the 17th season in that time from 2009 to now. And I think we can go ahead and say they're not going to win 10 games this year. I think that's already off the table. They don't have enough games left to win 10 games. So in the 17 seasons since that run of greatness, which is not quite as we were using a sort of a 19 season comparison, but now, pretty close, 17 seasons. In the 17 seasons since, they've gone from being almost 80% winning to about 60% winning. They've won on average 50 less games during almost the same amount of time, 2 less seasons. They've only had 5 10 win or better seasons as opposed to 11 from the previous time. No SEC or national championships. And when they finished in the top 25, they finished 7 of the 16 complete seasons. And again, I don't think they're going to make the top 25 this season, so we can probably go ahead and say 7 of the 17 seasons they finished ranked in the top 25, which is, before it was 11 of 19, so more than half. This is less than half. And the average rank during this time is much lower. So now Georgia has completely flipped the script. Again, Georgia was a 680 winning percentage team with just 2 SEC champions and no national championships during that first 19 seasons. In this last 16, now 17 season, including this time, Georgia has a 781 winning percentage, 175 and 49. We've won 3 SEC championships, 2 national championships, and we've been ranked to finish the season 11 of 16 seasons, and it looks like we're well on the way to finishing in the top 25 this year, so that would be 12 of 17 seasons, with an average finishing rank of 5.9, almost, somewhere around 5 or 6 average rank over these last 17 seasons. So basically, the programs have flip-flopped, right? I mean, Florida has a run of dominance that's as good as any team in history for those 19 seasons, but then in the 17 seasons since, they are still a good program, but no championships, nothing remarkable to hang your hat on, just a good program knocking over a few 10-win seasons and a few top 25 teams. Georgia was a little better than that in that first 19 seasons, but that's where we've kind of flip-flop, is that Georgia now has moved into that elite level. In these last 17 seasons, Georgia is now close to 80% winning percentage, 2 national championships, 3 SEC championships, ranked every year in the top 5 or 6. So, and then really you look at these last few years, and it's really been an even more stark contrast. And this is where the angst is for Florida fans right now, and this is why Billy Napier's out of a job. Billy Napier comes in because Dan Mullen was good, not great, right? Dan Mullen goes 10-3 in his first season and 11-2 in his next season. And he's got them. I mean, they finished his first season, they finished ranked 7th in the AP poll, 6th in the AP poll his second season. They made a couple SEC championship games in there. So, I mean, Dan Mullen, is not, but then he goes 8-4. And there's some unrest because they're going backwards, right? And then he starts off the next season 5-6, and then he's out of the job before the end of the season. And he doesn't finish the season in his 4th season. He just goes 5-6 after following up an 8-4 season, and he's out. And that's the 2021 season. And that's after being in the SEC championship game just the year before, and having a 10 and 11 win season. So Florida's not, but none of those seasons really, even when they make it to the SEC championship game, they get beat pretty thoroughly by Alabama. So again, what you see is this talent gap that we've been talking about that Georgia often has with the teams. You see a consistent talent gap, and you say, look, 10, 11 wins, Florida's saying, and I get it. I think that they're not necessarily wrong. You look at that 19 season run, you say, that's what we should be. We should be the elite of the elite, winning SEC and national championships, just having 10, 11 win seasons. And this is the same choice that we made when we decided to move on from Mark Richt. This is the same thing we said is, hey, this isn't good enough anymore to just have some nice seasons and finish in the top 10, but not really be a part of the championship. And you really saw that when Florida made that SEC championship game and a couple times there, and they just get beat down. I mean, they're not really competitive against Alabama. And look, Alabama makes a lot of people look not competitive these days, right? But when you see that, you just say, well, wait a minute, this is what we got here for. And if we don't really have a chance to win, then it's just window dressing, right? And Florida, to their credit, is a good enough program. They respect themselves enough to say, we're not a window dressing program. We're not just happy making it to the game and saying, look, we did it. Participation trophy. They want to win. So they let Dan, so Dan Mullen's gone and Billy Napier's brought in to make things better. Well, Billy Napier makes things worse. They have finished in the top 25 exactly no times under Billy Napier. They've been ranked to start the season or made it as high as 12 or 13 a couple of the seasons he's coached. They started the season. In fact, only one of the seasons that Billy Napier's been coached did they start the season preseason top 25. That was this year. They started as preseason top 15. And now they're 3-4 and they fired Billy Napier. So again, expectations just not living up to it. In some ways, it's surprising he was given this long. I mean, Napier's gone 6-7, 5-7, 8-5, and now 3-4 this season. So he has a losing record in 3 and a partial season. And and Dan Mullen was let go because he was only going 8-4 all of a sudden, right? So again, from 2020 to now, Florida's 36-34. A 514 winning percentage. So again, just keep coming at 80%, 60%. Now you're down to 50%, right? Their one big claim to fame in the last 4 or 5 seasons, they won the Gasparilla Bowl last year over Tulane to finish 8-5. They've had just 2 winning seasons in this time span. I tried to look through and see what could you hang your hat on if you're a Florida fan that made you feel good, say, because again, I keep making that point, right? Like it can't always all be about championships. Sometimes you just have to appreciate beating your rivals, beating highly ranked teams, pulling, showing people that you're relevant, having fun and just enjoying. I mean, I enjoyed thoroughly last game against Ole Miss, right? That it was a lot of fun watching that game. Yes, it was tense and it was close. And yes, you are a little concerned that the defense let them score 5 straight touchdowns. And yet, the offense kept us in it. There was that gritty performance, and you just had this sense that like, hey, we're never out of a game. We've seen that already. And there were some remarkable plays in that game. It was a remarkable flow of the game where we just kept scoring and they kept scoring. And then all of a sudden we make the comeback and then now we're ahead. And now all of a sudden the defense kicks in and the enthusiasm and the roar from the crowd just built, and it was fun. It was exciting. And so I think there's something to that, right? What does Florida had to hang their hat on? Well, back in 2022, they started the season off they had a game against then ranked number 7 Utah, preseason number 7. They beat them. And that was kind of a shock. And they were like, hey, maybe Florida's back. Maybe Billy Napier's got something here, right? And but they go on to finish 6-7. So no, that was nothing really else in that season that was worth. They lost all their other ranked opponents that year. In 2023, they've kind of owned Tennessee during this time. So they beat Tennessee again. Tennessee was ranked number 11 in the 2023 season. They beat Tennessee early in the season. That was a big blow to Tennessee. But again, they'll go on to lose all the rest of their games against ranked teams, and they're going to finish 5-7. So nothing great to brag about there. Last year, 2024, they beat number 9 Ole Miss. They beat number 21 LSU. These were some of the games they closed out the season on their 4-game win streak to close the season, including their bowl last year. They started 4-5, then they win 4 in a row to finish 8-5. And they lost their games to Georgia and Texas, but they beat Ole Miss and LSU. So they did beat a couple. LSU's a rival, and Ole Miss may or may not be a real rival for them. But hey, they beat a team that was ranked number 9 and talking about the playoffs. And so that was something fun. So last year was kind of the high water mark, obviously, the last 4 or 5 years. Definitely the high water mark of the Billy Napier era. And then this year they beat number 9 Texas. But, they weren't able to pay that off any from there. And, therein lies a real problem because, what happens after that? Well, they turn around after that, and let's see, what did they do? I keep saying, oh yeah, they lost to Texas A&M. I'm sorry. They went on the road and they played Texas A&M. And look, right now it looks like no shame to lose to Texas A&M. They're probably legitimately the number 5 team in the country. They're undefeated. They beat Florida 34-17. They beat LSU that bad or worse. So, I think that, again, Florida's a dangerous team. They are talented on a certain level. They're not maybe as talented as Georgia, but they have the talent with the right coaching. They could play they could play closer, they could play tough, and they have shown it. They've won 2 of their last 3. They beat number 9 Texas, lost to A&M, but then beat Mississippi State. And Mississippi State's not terrible. They're still winless in the SEC, but they came in to the game this last week against Texas with a 4-4 record. So better than last year, where they only won 2 games, I think, or 1, so the whole season. So, but I guess one of the things I looked at, I thought was interesting, was you say, well, what's happened? Part of what's happened is they have fallen back in talent. And so this will be the best we can do about sort of seeing where we are and what we can expect going forward. Because like I said, there's no tendencies or anything to really look at or break down here. I'm still going to go through, and we'll do one more podcast before the game for Saturday morning. They'll come out for Saturday morning, and we'll do our breakdown, and we'll do our true outcomes and our true, the matchups, offense, defense, special teams, coaching. Then we'll look at the true outcomes, and we'll say what we think our prediction is of the Florida game. So we'll do that on Saturday morning like we do before each game. But it's going to be harder, and there's less to really go on because of the lack of a coach, that we can look at and know, like I said. But what I think we can look at is the talent comparison. And I know that we've lost a lot of talent in the last couple of years, and that seems to be affecting the product on the field a little bit. But one of the things I thought was interesting, 247 Sports, which I like a lot of what they do. They have an actual, and I should have brought this up sooner in the season, because I've mentioned the talent index before, and I've just kind of generically said, talent. And I think we all just agree. I mean, most of the time I've used it and said, hey, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, these are the most talented teams in the country. Well, we know that. We've seen the recruiting, and even with the portal era, it's not like Georgia doesn't. I mean, Georgia doesn't build a whole roster and bring in 70 portal players like some schools do. But you look at the players we have brought in from the portal in the last couple of years: London Humphreys, Zachariah Branch, Zion Branch, Travis Etienne, going back up. These are guys, Josh McCray this year. So, I mean, Georgia, much like the high school recruiting, if Georgia wants to put its neck or dip its toe into the portal pool, then Georgia's able to pull what it needs from that pool and among the best players. Yes, we stuck our nose out there a little bit and said we were interested in Mendoza. He went to Indiana. Again, I don't know that means that, he snubbed his nose or didn't like what he saw, but the fit was probably there, and he certainly didn't have to compete with a guy who's as good as Gunner. And so, I think, and who knows where the money was? I don't know, because I'm sure we think one of the things that was a factor with Beck not coming back was that the money, since he was expected to go, had been allocated elsewhere. So I'm not sure what they had in terms of money to offer Mendoza, and I'm not sure what he got from Indiana. Nobody really knows in these deals, right? But 247 Sports does put out a talent roster and a sort of a talent index. And the 2025 Georgia team, I didn't really realize this when I found this, but the 20 is at the top of the talent index. They're the highest rated team based on talent. Now, we may not feel like we're seeing that on the field, but again, this is based on rankings of 4 and 5 star recruits, 3-star recruits, and then putting all the composite of all of them together on sort of an index and saying, here's what this amounts to. And a lot of that may yield potential. And one thing I can tell you is I've sorted it and looked at their ranking, and let me kind of just give you a couple numbers on this. Georgia has 70 4 and 5 star players on the roster currently, 13 5 stars and 57 4 stars. So, and that group is weighted heavily towards the freshmen. When you sort them by year, what you see is probably 60 or 70%. I didn't count it up, but like 60 or 70% of the 4 and 5 star players, the 74 5 star players, are freshmen, which is kind of amazing. And then a pretty decent chunk at sophomore. So the talent index is often on the young side, which means that there's a lot of potential there, right? So, and let me just grow through this roster a little bit and just you'll recognize some names just starting at the top. Like these are the guys who are the highest ranked player on the team, starting from the highest ranked player and going down. Highest ranked player on our team by recruiting ranking, Ellis Robinson. Okay. And then Elijah Griffin, who's defensive lineman, number 90, Justin Williams, a linebacker, Isaiah Gibson. These are a couple guys who played a little bit, but you haven't heard as much about them, not as much quite as you had about Ellis Robinson. Then the fifth most talented guy on the roster, by recruiting ranking, Zachariah Branch, right? Okay, not too much shock there. J.K. Bolden, Joseph Jonah Ajoyne, Taylon Taylor, the wide receiver, who was our highest rated wide receiver recruit on the team, 5-star recruit. They were trying to get him in the game, and he famously dropped the ball that would have been a surefire touchdown against Alabama. Again, we're not knocking him on that. He subsequently got hurt and has been out with a undisclosed upper body injury. Dalen Everett, Zayden Walker, Chris Cole, Elias Williams, Raylan Wilson, one of the guys punched out the ball, Jackson Arnold, Jordan Hall, Monroe Freeling, Janelle Aguero, Ernest Green, Nate Frazier, DeMello Jones. See, these names are getting very familiar. Juan Gaston, Micah Morris, Gabe Harris, CJ Allen, Oscar Delp, Christian Miller, CJ Wiley. I'm just working my way down now. Gunnar Stockton. So this is, we're working our way down the list. So these are the guys who are all in that mix of 70 4- and 5-star players. And as I call out their names, even I get down further down the list, you got Sokovi White, a couple other guys. Quintavious Johnson's been making it. Ja'Cory Thomas has been on the field a lot, and Noah Thomas is on. We're waiting to see him emerge a little more, and maybe will now that all of a sudden I went mental on our poor wide receiver's name. I've suddenly just dumped on him all of a sudden. Sorry, Colby Young. Oh, that's terrible. I just had a mental block where I couldn't come up with Colby Young. Now that Colby Young is hurt and is going to be out for a little while, hopefully we're going to see Noah Thomas step into that role a little bit more and succeed. So 70 players. 70 players is just a ton, right? So what has Florida got? Florida, Billy Napier's been, they've had some recruiting rankings. They're in the top 10 or 15, and Florida's talent index is not that far off. Georgia's the number 1 team in the country this year in the talent index. Florida's number 12. Okay. But that gap, what does that mean? Florida has 52 players. So 18 less players that are 4- and 5-star players. And they have 4 former 5-star players on their roster right now and 48 4-stars. So again, you look at that and you'd say, well, maybe they don't have as many. No, they have less in both, right? Georgia has 13 5-star players on the roster, and some of those guys are guys I was just talking about that you know the names of, and they're contributing now. They may not be contributing as much as we want to see towards better defense and more explosive offense, but those are names you're familiar with. And you look at the 4-star players, well, Georgia has 57 of those. Florida has 48 of those. So again, Georgia's got another 9 of those guys on the field. There's just a noticeable difference even amongst a team like Florida that has been an elite team in the past, was a dominant team for 19 seasons from 1990 through 2008, and has been gradually working its way down. Well, one of the things that I think Billy Napier has done, actually, he has started building it back up. So this is not a talentless team. I mean, they're not the number 12 team in the country, as their talent index might suggest. And that maybe also points to why it's fair and reasonable that Florida is moving on from Billy Napier, because if you have the 12th best talent in the country on the field, at least in terms of raw talent or recruit talent, how you develop that and what that team does on the field. You're 3-4, you're unranked. You started the season in the top 15, but you're out of the rankings, and you have a losing record. And I can see the lack of patience there. I can see the lack, or maybe it's not a lack of patience. I can see the desire to say, wait a minute, we thank you for bringing in a 5-star quarterback like DJ Lagway. Thank you for elevating the programming, which had fallen to down in the 20s or 30s under Dan Mullen, and that's one of the reasons Florida moved on from him, not just because he wasn't winning big enough, not just because they were, but that's what you saw when they played Alabama in the SEC championship game, is this huge talent gap where they weren't competitive. And Dan Mullen just wasn't doing good. He was doing great at the X and O's, and everybody knows he's a smart coach and a good guy, a good coach when it comes to getting the most out of his team, and he did that at Mississippi State. But against Florida, not against Florida, against the SEC at Florida, he was not taking advantage of the recruiting advantages they have to put both excellent play calling and out scheming the other team along with having the best talent. And he just wasn't willing to get the best talent. Well, Billy Napier is bringing better talent on the field. He's raised them up from being in the 20s or 30s talent-wise to back into the top 15. They're number 12. But that's not producing on the field. You're not seeing that. Going 8-5 last year and winning the Gasparilla Bowl and being 3-4 this year, that's not living up to having the 12th best talent. But even when you look at that 12th best talent, that's the difference between Georgia and Florida right now, right? Is Georgia's number 1 in that talent index. They're 20, 30%. I mean, it's 12 ranking spots, but some of these numbers, when you say what's the difference, 18, what did I say? It was 18 and 52. So Georgia's effectively 35% higher level of recruiting talent that they brought in. So that's a big difference. It's a big difference. So I think that gives you a sense of where the state of these programs are right now. It probably leads you to know where I'm going to go when we break things down. It's going to be hard to look at a team that doesn't have a head coach, that is, not even if they were living up to their talent, they have 35% less raw talent on the field in an objective attempt to measure that than Georgia does. And then the results on the field lately, when you look at the last few seasons, don't show you. They don't have any significant wins. Yes, they beat LSU last year. Yes, they beat Ole Miss last year. Those are decent wins, and they beat Texas this year. It's hard to say, but it shows you they're dangerous. So could they win the game against Georgia? Yeah, they can. They've got a high level of talent. This quantifies that a little bit, I think, because I think it's a little frustrating as a fan when you say, well, Florida's talented. They have a high level of talent. They're playing good defense, and they have a 5-star quarterback in DJ Lagway. And you sit back and you say, well, if they're so talented, why are they losing? Well, that's the reason Florida's administration is asking that question too, which is why Billy Napier is getting fired or has been fired. But at the same time, I guess what am I trying to say there? There is still a huge gap even between Georgia at its lowest performing level on the field. And I say lowest because, as I keep saying, we're number 5 in the country. Okay. And we have as good a resume as just about any team in the country. I mean, at this point in the season, there's still very few teams. Ohio State, they have 2 wins against teams in the top 25, and those teams are barely in the top 25. Texas it's not even clear that Texas should be in the top 25. I think people just want them to be, right? They have 2 losses. That's not bad. They're 6-2, but I mean, they are very shaky looking down there, and they really should have lost the game to Mississippi State. They by all rights, I mean, you can say it was a great comeback, but Mississippi State just completely, I watched the last 10 minutes of that game. They just folded like a cheap tent. And I mean, look, Texas went through the open door, and kudos to them. They did what they had to do. And people might say the same thing about the way we managed to win on the road against Tennessee. But I watched both games, and I can tell you that Mississippi State was far more in command and control and just quit, just stopped making any plays at all. And I mean, just terrible. Watching the last play when it came down to 4th and forever to get them a chance to see if they could win or tie the game up or whatever the option was. I forget what it was there, but and I mean, their quarterback Shapen he's like chased 30 yards backwards and just flings the ball into no man's land, and Florida gets it. I mean, Texas gets it. I mean, it's just terrible. Just not even a play. And they were 4th and forever. They had 2 false starts, and they'd gone backwards on their previous plays. I mean, just terrible. Oh, that was in overtime. That's right. It was Texas got the touchdown in overtime. The game went to overtime. Texas got the ball first, scores the touchdown, and so now it's up to Mississippi State to try to answer, and they don't gain a yard. They go backwards, just profoundly backwards. I mean, it was just terrible looking. So, Texas is a very shaky, point I'm getting at, Texas is a very shaky team in the top 25. And then Illinois was the other team that Ohio State had played and beaten. It was in the top 25. You know what? I meant to look this up and see. I wasn't even sure that they were actually still completely there, but I'll pull this information up real quick. We'll see if we can find it. I just wanted to see, where is Ohio State? Let's see. And there's a point to this, so bear with me. I apologize because I should have had this pulled up, or I should have already queued up this stat. But I thought I knew it off the top of my head, but I honestly didn't compare. The real trick here is I didn't really compare the rankings when the new rankings came out because we didn't have a game, and we were at number 5 and we stayed at number 5. And so it didn't draw me into, sorry, I'm having trouble just knowing my alphabet. So let's see. So Ohio State, this tells you the current rankings. That's what I was trying to do. Yeah, so Texas is ranked 20. So right, this is what I thought. I started to say before. What caught my attention was that Illinois had been the other team. So coming into last weekend, they had 2 games on their resume, which they had wins against top 25 teams. That was Texas at like 23 or 21, and Illinois at 23. Well, Illinois lost over the weekend and got bounced out of the top 25. And Texas did win the game against, I think they moved up 1 spot from 21 to 20. So at this point, Ohio State is 7-0. They're undefeated. They're the unquestioned number 1 team in the country. And I'm not saying they don't deserve to be number 1, but when you talk about resume, this is another way I just want to kind of, again, give you something to think about. I mean, it's easy to sit back and think as a Georgia fan, oh, our defense has been so terrible, we're barely winning these games. Yeah, well, but we have wins against the current number 7 team and the current number 14 team in the country. Ohio State, who's the undisputed number 1 team in the country right now, has 1 win against a current top 25 team. I don't care what they were I've told you this before, I don't care what they were when they played them. That means nothing. It's where are they now and where are they going to finish. Now, it's hard to always project in the season where they're going to finish, but we can see right now, and that's where I was trying to get to a list that shows me the current rankings. So they have 1 win against the current top 25 team, and that's Texas at number 20. And so what do we think? I mean, they could just as easily be unranked. So whereas Georgia has 2 wins against current top 15 teams, number 7 and number 14. So as far as resume, as far as accomplishments, Georgia has done more on paper as far as winning games against top teams, and those teams are teams that are likely going to stay in the top 25, at least at some level, right? Where do you think Ole Miss is going to finish the season? Are they going to finish number 7? I don't know, but are they going to finish out of the top 25? Not unless they just utterly collapse. They could or should win every remaining game on their schedule and then make the playoffs. So, I mean, I think Ole Miss is going to finish in the top 15, top 10. And then Tennessee, a little less clear about. Tennessee still has, they got a couple challenges on their schedule. I think they're playing Oklahoma next, and they got to play Vanderbilt. And so, I mean, there's some tough games out there for Tennessee, but Tennessee probably stays in the top 25 too. I think they've done enough this season that they're probably not going to fall out of the top 25. So, it's just a difference. It's just something that you have to start to look at. It's because, again, there's not equals in these conferences. So you can't just easily look up and down the roster and say, what's everybody done? You know that Alabama has won, 4 games against top 25 teams in a row, after including us. So, I mean, that's quite an accomplishment. And, Indiana is up there at number 2, right? Well, what have they done? Well, they have beaten current number 6 Oregon. So that is impressive. They went to Oregon, and they won that game fair and square. I mean, they won that game. The score was 30-20. They won by 10. I don't know if some people have said that wasn't representative of the game. I think it probably was. I think a 10-point road win against a very top level team, that's impressive. But that's their 1 win against a team in the top 25. Yes, it was on the road against number 6, which is, I mean, that's outstanding. You can't take that, but that's it. As far as resume to compare, they have exactly 1 win against the top 25. Miami, has sort of fallen down after they took the loss. But part of the deal, too, with Miami that you have to consider is some of their wins haven't, there was, some of them have, some of their losses, some of their wins haven't. I mean, okay, what am I trying to say? Notre Dame has worked its way back up into the polls, so they're currently number 12. So they beat number 12, and they lost to Louisville. That's the only other team on their schedule who is currently ranked. So they've played 2 games against teams that are currently ranked, and they lost one and won one. And so they have 1 win against a top 15 team. That's the best thing you can say about their accomplishments on their schedule. Again, USF, big deal when they played them. They're not ranked anymore. Florida is not ranked and is not a good team. Florida State, again, not ranked, not a good team. Don't care what they were when you played them. So you just look at these teams and you say, well, what have they done? Alabama's number 4. You know what they've done. We don't have to go into that. We're number 5. Oregon is number 6. So Oregon is another case of a team. Let's see what they've done. Oregon has Indiana is the only top 25 team that they've played. So they have lost to the current number 2 team in the country. Other than that, they don't have a win or another loss. They don't have a win against a top 25 team. So do you see the point I'm getting at? Alabama, by what I've just said, has the most impressive resume in the country, having played and won 4 games or more against top 25 teams. In fact, let's just look that up right now and see where they are. I mean, you know what they did because it's kind of talked about it, but let's just put it into a direct thing. So Alabama has beaten current number 5, number 9, number 19, and number 14. Okay? Nobody in the country has a better resume. I'm not saying Alabama is definitely the best team in the country. They look flawed. We should have beat them. They've played close games. They played a close game against Missouri. They had a very close game. They should have lost the game against South Carolina. I say should have, but I mean, South Carolina had an 8-point lead with a few minutes to go. Bama does a great job of tying it up, but South Carolina gets the ball with a couple minutes to go. All they need in a tie game is a field goal to walk off winner. They fumble the ball in their own territory. Alabama gets it, gets the game-winning points, and wins the game. I mean, Alabama won it. They made the fumble happen, and I mean, they did what they needed to do. I'm not trying to take it away from them, but they were on the ropes, and they could have easily lost that game. But so I'm not, again, it's hard when you say who's the best team in the country. Point is that, they have the best resume, and based on what I was just saying, we have one of the best resumes, right? We've beaten 2 top 15 teams, 1 number 7 team and number 14 team. Those are 2 wins that we have in the country. Nobody else that I just listed other than Alabama in the top 7 has 2 wins against top 25 teams, much less top 15 teams. Only Alabama is the only other team that can say something like that out of those top elite teams that I just said. So by resume, and yeah, we have a loss, but that was by 3 points to arguably the best team by resume in the country. So, and the current number 4 team, not exactly a big failing on our part. So it's easy to feel like this team has taken a huge step back. And statistically, we don't see the kind of greatness that we're used to. And yet you look at the position, and this is what I've been talking about all year, and you look at the comparatives, you look at what the other teams around us have done and what they're doing. And there are no amazing, great teams. There are no teams with just these unbelievable sterling records out there, right? And so, there's every reason to believe in Georgia as much as any other team. So now we're going to go play Florida. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they are. Billy Gonzalez, let me just wrap up by saying, who is Billy Gonzalez and what has he done? Billy Gonzalez was the wide receivers coach. He has been around the Mullen-Urban Meyer coaching group for quite a while. He hooked in with them and was a wide receivers coach all the way back in Utah with Urban Meyer and Dan Mullen when they were at Utah before they came over to Florida. He followed them to Florida, and then he was out at LSU for a while, then Illinois and Mississippi State. He was an offensive coordinator for a few years at Mississippi State. He's been a passing game coordinator. He came back with Mullen back to Florida, and then when Mullen left, he was at Florida Atlantic for a season, and then he came back this year as a wide receiver coach now at Florida, and so he's now gotten the gig. So he's had several different stints back and forth at Florida, originally with Urban Meyer, But, Dan Mullen was offensive coordinator for Urban Meyer before he breaks out, gets the job at Mississippi State. He goes to Mississippi State with Dan Mullen. Then he comes back to Florida with Dan Mullen. Then he left after Mullen was gone, and now he's come back again under Billy Napier. So he's back and forth. You might even think he had a long time Florida history from all that, but he didn't. He played mostly as a special teams guy, I think, at Colorado State back in the 80s and late 80s and early 90s. He's basically my age. And, other than that, I can't tell you much else about him. I mean, he's largely been on the offensive side of the ball. He hasn't risen to really take over. He's been an offensive coordinator or co-offensive coordinator a couple times. He's never really stuck as a big name that moved up. I think he's been solid enough to be in the job and be there for a while. I have no idea what he's going to do. I mean, I think we can expect in this game that he's going to do what a lot of teams have done recently and that I was talking about at the beginning of this podcast. He's going to try and pull out some stops. He's going to try and go against tendencies. He's going to try and do something different on paper than what Florida's done before, and he's going to try and take advantage of the fact that you can generally count on Georgia to do what Georgia does on paper. So, I mean, not just on paper, but in person. Georgia's going to come out and play Georgia's game, and he's hopefully going to try. I mean, I say hopefully for them. I think he's going to try and do something. Look, they got nothing to lose, but I don't think like I said, I don't think they were uninspired before. So I don't know that this changes much. I don't think it moves the needle very much. And at the end of the day, they're still a talented but less talented team. They mostly hang their hat on their defense, does Florida. They are, on the season, they are scoring 22 points a game. They're giving up 20. Their defense is a little better than that, but when your offense is that bad, it's hard for the defense to do much better. So the defense is giving up like 330 something yards a game. We're giving up 313. Again, I think they're probably a little bit better than that. They just have been on the field too much. But the offense has been a real struggle. The offense has scored over 30 points or more in exactly one game this season, and that was against Long Island University in their first game of the year. They won that 55-0. But even their wins, they beat Texas 29-21, so just under. They got to 29 points, but not 30. They beat Mississippi State last time out 23-21. So again, their offense in other games has scored 16, 10, 7, 17. So they haven't scored 30 points in any game other than the first game against the horribly outmatched Long Island University. So their defense has tried to keep them in games, but there's just so much they can do. They do have a 5-star quarterback. They got a freshman wide receiver who busted out in the game against Texas. And got a lot of publicity, but hasn't done a ton since. They've got a running back he's like fourth in the league in the conference, 87 yards a game. He's got over 600 yards, but he's got 611 yards on the season. They've ran for just under 900. So he's literally the entire team. Whereas Georgia doesn't have any player. Just looking real quick, when you look at the rushing yards, let me tell you real quick. So Chauncey Bowens has 376, Frazier has 349, Gunnar Stockton has 279, Dwight Phillips has 142. We don't have hardly any one guy. No one guy has gotten over 400, much less than of 600 yards like their guy. But as a team, we've run for over 1,300 yards and we're averaging 190 a game. So Florida's not able to put those kind of numbers up. Just hasn't been that kind of a season for them. So, I think it's look, we'll break it down some more as we get to that game prediction. I think this is a good place to call it. I think this has been something that I think was kind of useful, is getting a look at the perspective. And it gives me a lot of perspective as a fan, why I've been so aggrieved about Florida. Obviously, the losing record being 13-22 in the last 35 years, that's been tough to watch. Florida's been the only team to do that to us. Yes, the recent history against Alabama, but that's still nothing compared to this. Yes, the 9-game losing streak against Tennessee, but we've completely reversed that. We still have a long way to catch up to what Florida has done to us. And the one thing that you can see is at least the fortunes have flipped, whereas they were an elite team, top of the game for almost 20 seasons, SEC champions, national champions, 80% winning percentage. We've flipped the script. We're that team now, and they're chasing it. And that seems to be what this rivalry is about, is that there's a little bit of a zero-sumness. I can't really point to a lot of games where I can say this game turned it, we had won it, we'd have been in the SEC championship, they wouldn't have. That is true of the very first year of the SEC championship game, 1992. I know that was true. I don't know that it was so much true in so many of these other games. But yet, when they won against Georgia, they were in the SEC championship game more often than not. When we've been beating them, more often than not. We've won 7 of 8 against Florida. We've been in 7 of the last 8 SEC championship games. So the fortunes of the teams as far as SEC and national championships and bragging rights all seems to come down to this world's largest outdoor cocktail party for both these teams. It doesn't always look that way as the definitive game, and yet, like I said, you look at the trend lines go together. So I think that's why I've been aggrieved. That's why I am excited. I don't care whether they have an interim coach or not. I don't care how much talent they have. I don't care if they're the worst team in America. I'm still going to revel over watching my team pound the Gators. It never gets old. We still owe them. We are still upside down in my lifetime in the series. We're still, like I said, 13 and 22. So we're still 9 games under 500 despite winning 7 of 8. So we need to win another 9 of, no, more than that. We need to win like another 11 of 13 just to get back to even in my lifetime. So there's no let up. There's no reason to feel pity for them. There's no reason to think, oh, it's the Florida Gators. Look, we owe them a lot. And the history of this series has been the team that dominates this series is also the team that rises up and is the challenger against Alabama in the SEC for who's the second best team in the SEC. So, and I don't mean second best team this year or last year. Obviously, Georgia was the best team in the SEC for much of the last 3 or 4 seasons. Even though Alabama has beaten us, they beat us last year. But did they make the playoff? No. Did they win the SEC? No, we did. But you know what I mean. Right now, when you look at the history, though, 30 SEC championships, Georgia's second all time in the SEC at 15. They've doubled us up. So again, if we win every SEC championship for the rest of the time I still have teeth, it's going to be hard for us to catch up to Alabama in that regard. So I'm not saying we're second best, but historically that's where we are. So right now, that race, that team that's been the challenger for Alabama, well, that's been Georgia throughout the history of the conference, and it's definitely been true these last 10 years. But for a while there, it was Florida, and that's how everybody saw it. And we've wrested control of that back, and we do it by winning this game. And so we got to keep winning this game, and I don't care what their situation is. I'm looking forward to it. And we're going to break it down and talk about what we actually think is going to happen on the field in tomorrow's podcast, which will probably be a little shorter than this one. We'll just go through the outcomes and the matchups. And again, I've already alluded to some of it, so there won't be that much to go over. And there's not that much else we can say about what their tendencies are. We don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see it on the field. But it should be exciting, and I hope a bunch of you guys that are down there are enjoying it, enjoying some nice weather. For a while, it looked like you'd just be transferring from warm weather to warm weather, but all of a sudden it's been rainy and cold this week, so everybody who's headed to the beach, I think from what I saw in the weather, you're going to get nice, sunny, and 70-degree weather. So this should be an ideal cocktail party, and I hope it continues to be ideal with a thorough beatdown of the much-hated Gators. So until Saturday, until it's time to tee it up on the field, hope you have fun wherever you are and whatever you're doing. And you know what we say at the end of every day. Anytime two dog fans see each other in passing, what should we say? Go Dogs.